Your DNA carries code from a species now extinct. 300,000 years ago, that borrowed sequence helped an entire population breathe where others suffocated. But at least 4 other hidden advantages sit in human ancestry right now, and almost every one of them has a cost that only shows up when the environment changes. These are not superpowers. They are not racial rankings. They are local adaptations that rose in frequency because they solved a specific problem in a specific place. Ancestry is not a fixed category you belong to. It is a mosaic of inherited solutions, each shaped by a different pressure, a different landscape, a different threat. And the strongest pattern running through all of them is this: when the environment shifts, yesterday's advantage can become today's burden. That borrowed code would later become the clearest example of how evolution never designs for the future. It only responds to what is killing people right now. Imagine living your entire life at the top of a mountain, where every breath delivers roughly 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Your body's first instinct is to make more red blood cells, to pack more oxygen carriers into your bloodstream. And for a short visit, that strategy works. But if your blood stays that thick for months or years, it moves like sludge through your vessels, raising the risk of clots, stroke, and heart failure. The solution seems obvious: just make more blood. But the obvious solution is the dangerous one. Tibetan populations solved this problem, and not by building better lungs or stronger hearts. They solved it by regulating how many red blood cells their bodies produce in the first place. The gene responsible is called EPase-1, and it controls part of the low oxygen response system. What makes this gene remarkable is where it came from. The version carried by most Tibetans traces back to Denisovans, an ancient human relative that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. Mating between modern humans and Denisovans introduced this variant into the gene pool. Under the intense pressure of high-altitude living, it spread rapidly through the population. The result is not more oxygen machinery. It is a different regulatory strategy. Instead of flooding the bloodstream with extra cells, the Tibetan version keeps hemoglobin within a safer range. One extinct species, one piece of inherited code, one population that breathes easier because of it. And that ancient population, they disappeared from the earth entirely. But their genetic contribution survived inside someone else's children. I make a new video about your body's hidden engineering every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. About 10,000 years ago, something strange started happening across multiple continents independently. Adults began keeping the ability to digest milk long past childhood. Today, most adults on Earth cannot digest lactose without discomfort. If you can drink milk without trouble, you carry a variant that keeps your gut producing the enzyme that breaks down milk sugar well into adulthood. For decades, scientists assumed the explanation was simple. Populations that herded animals and drank milk would naturally select for milk tolerance. More milk, more calories, more surviving children. Straightforward natural selection. But a 2022 study turned that story upside down. Researchers found that people across prehistoric Europe were using milk in pottery for thousands of years before the lactose tolerance gene became common. The intensity of milk use in a region did not predict how fast the gene spread. What did predict it was famine and disease. Under normal conditions, drinking milk without the enzyme causes cramps and diarrhea. Unpleasant, but survivable. During a famine or a gut infection, that same diarrhea can be fatal. Dehydration kills faster when you are already starving or already sick. So the gene did not spread because milk drinkers were constantly healthier. It may have spread because people without the gene died faster during rare but brutal crises. The advantage was invisible most of the time, and lethal in its absence only when everything else went wrong. The gene was useful for thousands of years before it became common. That delay changes everything scientists previously assumed about how diet shapes our genes. That pattern, a gene whose value only appears under extreme stress, leads somewhere darker. What happens when a single variant protects you from one threat, but causes a completely different disease depending on how many copies you inherit? You have probably heard of sickle cell as a disease. 2 copies of the variant reshape red blood cells into rigid crescents that block small vessels, causing pain, organ damage, and shorten life. But one copy does something entirely different. In regions where a specific malaria parasite thrives, carrying a single copy of the sickle cell variant provided roughly 50% protection against mild malaria, 75% protection against hospitalization, and close to 90% protection against severe and complicated malaria in 2 studied groups of Kenyan children. One substitution in one gene. One copy is a shield. 2 copies become a blade turned inward. The variant persists in populations because the protection it offers to carriers outweighs, across a whole community, the cost it imposes on those who inherit a double dose. The math only works at the population level. It never works at the individual level for someone born with 2 copies. 90% protection from one tiny change in one gene. But the math is merciless if you draw the wrong hand. Pay attention to this next example, because it shows what happens when the original threat disappears, but the genetic cost stays behind. 2 variants in a gene called APOL1 can destroy a sleeping sickness parasite in laboratory conditions. That parasite was historically lethal in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, killing without treatment. The variants likely rose in frequency because they helped people survive that specific infection. But those same 2 variants are strongly associated with kidney disease, specifically a type of scarring in the kidney's filtering units. The parasite is largely absent from modern urban environments. The kidney risk remains. A gene that once defended against a lethal infection now correlates with a disease its carriers never asked for. The environment changed. The gene did not. You would think someone would have noticed sooner. For decades, nobody connected the 2. Every example so far shares one assumption. The host adapts and the story ends. The human body closes a door, and the threat stays locked out permanently. Most people never heard about what happened next. Your red blood cells carry surface proteins that parasites use as entry points, like doors on the outside of a cell. One such protein is called the Duffy receptor, a specific malaria parasite. The one called Vivax, historically used that receptor to invade red blood cells. In parts of Africa, a mutation arose that switches off Duffy production specifically on red blood cells. No receptor, no entry point, no invasion. For decades, textbooks stated this meant Duffy-negative individuals were essentially immune to Vivax malaria. The case seemed closed. The door was gone, so the parasite could never enter. Then field researchers in Madagascar found Vivax infections in people confirmed to be Duffy-negative. The parasite had found another way in. Evolution does not stop because the host adapts. The host closes a door. The parasite, given enough generations, builds a window. No barrier in biology is permanent because the other side is evolving too. So here is what connects all of this. Ancestry is not a fixed identity. It is not a set of superpowers or a medical sentence. It is a record of which environments your ancestors survived and which problems their bodies solved under pressure. Every solution was local, conditional, and temporary. A gene that helps you breathe on a mountain does nothing at sea level. A gene that protects against malaria can cause disease in a different dosage. A gene that kills a parasite can scar a kidney. A barrier that blocks one pathogen can be bypassed by evolution working from the other side. Your DNA does not tell you what you are. It tells you what your ancestors lived through. And the real question is not which population carries the best genes. The real question is what happens to all of these carefully tuned solutions now that almost none of us live in the environments that shape them.